All right. You may proceed, Mr. Binger.
May I proceed, Judge? The state calls Detective Ben Antaramian.
I do.
Could you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Detective Ben Antaramian, Antaraman.
How are you currently employed?
I'm a detective with the City of Kenosha Police Department.
How long have you been with the Kenosha Police Department?
10 years and some change now.
And how long have you been a detective?
About 3.5 years.
And do you recall what your assignment was on the evening of August 25th, 2020?
We were in a modified role, whereas traditionally we're investigators. We were initially assigned at the beginning of the shift to go to local gas stations and ensure that their pumps were turned off to prevent further fires that night.
When you say we, who is the we?
Detective Howard and I believe Detective Valeri was also with us.
Is that Detective Brandy Valeri?
Yes, sir.
And so other than going to the gas stations, did you have any other assignments that evening?
We were just assisting in general patrol. Any areas that needed help, we'd respond over and just see what they needed. People who were being taken into custody, we'd assist with that as well.
Now, I think we're all aware that beginning on Sunday night, August 23rd, after the shooting of Jacob Blake, there was a lot of unrest in Kenosha that continued on Monday night. What was the law enforcement response and planning and whatnot for Tuesday night, if you know?
By Tuesday night, and this comes from, I wasn't directly involved in the planning, obviously, that's way above my position, but generically speaking, by Tuesday night, we had multiple agencies that responded. The National Guard had arrived, so we had multiple, we call them pieces of armor, but Bearcats and MRAPs that were available to us. So by then, there was a more organized response. We had active patrol assignments, and we had dedicated areas of responsibility. We were able to respond more effectively to the bigger calls that Monday and Sunday we were able to respond to, but not as appropriately as we normally would.
And if you would please slow down a little bit for Madam Court Reporter.
Apologies.
The most important person in the room. Except for the judge, of course.
Oh, I think you are.
So, Detective, if there were situations that Tuesday night where there was some sort of report or a 911 call in some other part of Kenosha other than this downtown area, was the Kenosha Police Department equipped to handle those types of calls?
Absolutely.
I want to focus in on the downtown area, and there's that map that we've all been referring to. What was the logistical, the strategic plan, I guess, the tactical plan for handling any issues that arose in that area, the downtown area, on that particular night, if you know?
Again, speaking more generically, as it's not my pay grade, but we had dedicated SWAT teams along with, we call them a CDIRT, but essentially a riot team. We had dedicated units that were assigned to respond to specific calls. So if there was a fire, we'd have a dedicated SWAT team or a SWAT response along with a riot team to ensure that whatever problem we had could be properly handled.
Is it fair to say that during a part of that evening there was also a large number of police officers that were here outside the courthouse?
Correct.
The other units that you've just described, were they separate from the people that were out in front of the courthouse?
Yes, those were auxiliary personnel.
And you mentioned if there was a fire. So, for example, if the 59th Street car source or the 63rd Street car source had a structure fire or a house fire along in one of those areas or something like that, was there enough resources in law enforcement to respond to something like that?
To the best of my knowledge, there were, yes.
What about if there were smashed out car windows? Was that something that the law enforcement was going to come in and respond to?
No, unless it was a threat to life, we weren't going to be going at that point.
Is it fair to say that the response depended on the type of crime, the type of report that needed to be handled?
Correct.
So if it was just property damage, like broken windows or something like that, was that something that police were going to respond to?
Not at that time, no, not emergent.
What if it were a threat to life, such as a house fire or a shooting or a serious violence incident, something like that? Were there enough resources that night for the police to come in and respond as quickly as possible?
Correct, there were.
We've heard a lot of testimony in this case about the defendant shooting people that night. I want to put that aside. Other than that, was anyone else killed here in Kenosha as part of all these protests, riots, civil unrest, whatever you want to call it, on the night of August 25th?
No one else was killed that night.
Was anyone else seriously injured?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
You've described a little bit of your personal assignments that evening. Did there come a time in which your responsibility changed?
Yes, there was a time when that changed.
Tell us about that.
So around 11:49 p.m., there were multiple calls for shots fired in the area of 63rd Street and Sheridan Road. Initially, officers they believed to be chasing the involved parties were involved in the shooting, west and south. So it'd be off screen, but there's a minimum security prison closer to 65th and 14th. The foot pursuits had generally gone that way. So we were tasked with assisting with the perimeter that was established and trying to catch those people.
I want to stop you for a second because I believe you mentioned there was a report of a shooting at 63rd and Car Source. Is that right?
Correct.
Or 63rd and Sheridan, which is the Car Source, right? And we now know that's the killing of Joseph Rosenbaum. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Other than that, did Kenosha police respond to other unrelated shootings in that area at that same time?
Yes, so as that unfolded, we received more reports for shots fired, and as you've seen the videos and heard, it continued. But essentially there was what was believed to be an exchange of gunfire, and I believe it's Main Park, which is just west of the Car Source location at 226 Sheridan Road.
Can you use that laser pointer and point out that park that you just described? Okay. And what is the name of that park?
I believe it's Main Park.
And that's basically located between 10th and 11th Avenues and 62nd and 63rd Street. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay. And do you know whether or not there actually was any sort of shooting over there?
There were shots fired. In terms of someone hurt, we never received reports of anyone injured by gunfire in that area.
Do you know whether or not that had anything to do with the events in this case?
I do not believe it had anything to do with this case.
Is it fair to say, though, that while there was a need for a response to the shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum, other law enforcement resources were also trying to deal with that other incident simultaneously?
Correct. There were multiple squads. I believe there's actually a piece of armor that was utilized. There's like a daycare just behind the Car Source, and there were reports that a shooter had run into there. So, I mean, there was a large amount of police personnel in that area.
Now, you mentioned that at some point in the evening your responsibilities changed, and I know you were talking about the 63rd and Sheridan shooting. Did there come a time in which you, as a detective, were assigned to handle that investigation?
Shortly after midnight, I was given the news that I'd be the lead investigator assigned to this, along with Detective Howard.
And is it fair to say that since then you two have been the primary investigators in this case?
Correct.
Do you recall when it was that you learned that the person who had done those shootings was the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse?
Within a few hours, we were aware that it was Kyle Rittenhouse.
Did there come a time in which you and Detective Howard went down to the Antioch Police Department to meet with him?
Yes.
Did you determine how old Mr. Rittenhouse was on that particular day?
Yes, on the night of August 25th, 2020, he was 17 years old.
And his date of birth is January 3rd, 2003. Is that correct?
Correct.
As part of your investigation, did you take possession of the firearm that was involved, that the defendant used to shoot Mr. Rosenbaum, Mr. Huber, and Mr. Grosskreutz?
Yes, I took possession of it down in Antioch, Illinois, at their police department.
And I have, could you hold up that firearm? I'm having Detective Howard hold up a weapon that has been marked as exhibit number 28. You don't need to bring it to him, just if you could show it to him. Do you recognize that, Detective Antaramian?
Yeah, that's the firearm in question.
Is that the weapon that Mr. Rittenhouse used to shoot Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Huber, and Gage Grosskreutz on the night of August 25th, 2020?
Yes, sir.
And is it in substantially the same condition as it was when you took possession of it?
Yeah, that I would call it an optic, but the sight that was separated from it, when I took possession of it, that was still attached. I had to remove it so we could fit it into one of those gun boxes.
Detective Howard, could you hold that up one more time, please? I'm sorry. Making you use a lot of gloves here. I apologize. If you could just hold that up so the jury can see it, please. Right there is fine. Thank you. Detective Antaramian, did the weapon that we are looking at here, did it have that strap attached to the butt when you took possession of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. After you took possession of the defendant's weapon, what investigation, if any, did you do to determine whether or not that was actually the weapon used in these shootings?
So later on after that night, I believe it was the 28th, we had the weapon taken to what's called a NIBIN facility down in Chicago. N-I-B-I-N. I couldn't tell you exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's they test ballistics.
Can you bring that microphone really close so we can hear it?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So we took it to a NIBIN. Essentially, it was a trailer that the ATF had established down in Chicago. So we took it down there and handed it over to the NIBIN technicians, who subsequently test-fired the firearm, and they were able to correlate that the casings we had recovered at that time, it was 6 casings, did in fact come from that firearm.
And I think there's been some testimony that maybe the next day on the 29th, there were 2 more casings that you found, or Detective Howard found, for a total of 8?
Correct.
And those 8 spent shell casings were also given to Heather Williams, who testified earlier at the crime lab, to verify that information as well. Is that right?
Correct. So NIBIN typically won't give you a final report. They'll give you what they believe to be accurate, but then the crime lab has to actually confirm that information.
So then you had Heather Williams at the crime lab verify that the shell casings, the 8 shell casings, came from the defendant's gun. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Prior to having the defendant's gun brought to NIBIN or the crime lab, was the swabbing done to see if there's DNA on the gun?
Yes, the firearm was turned over to an evidence technician who performed the standard evidentiary DNA swabs they take from the firearm.
And that was Officer Jeff Van Wee?
Correct.
Is it possible for additional DNA testing to be done on an item in a case, a gun, a phone, any sort of physical item later on in the case?
Yes.
After that initial swabbing was done, did you ever receive a request from the defendant or his attorneys to have additional DNA testing done on the gun?
I'm going to object. Burden shifting.
I didn't hear what you said. You were objecting why? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I should use my microphone. It's burden shifting.
Rephrase your question.
I'll ask it this way, Detective Antaramian. After the first swabs were done by Officer Van Wee, did you ever receive a request from anyone to have additional swabs done on any part of that gun?
No.
If you had received such a request, would you have followed through with that?
Yes.
We've heard some testimony about an item that was recovered from Mr. Grosskreutz. Detective Howard, if you could locate that for us, please. What is the exhibit sticker on there? 61. This is an item which has already been introduced into evidence as exhibit number 61. Do you recognize that item?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what it is?
So, and I'm not an expert on this, but those are devices used by both our SWAT team and then our CEDART or riot teams. They're typically referred to as like a gas bomb, if you will, in layman's terms, but it's like a nerve gas, non-lethal, that is used to disperse crowds.
Is this a device that is used by law enforcement?
Yeah, some people would also call it tear gas.
Is this a device that a common layperson could create on their own at home?
No, I don't believe so.
Is this device, when it was recovered from Mr. Grosskreutz, had it already been used? Was it no longer capable of emitting any gas?
Based off my observations, it was already spent.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. Could we please have exhibit number 10 pulled up? Now, Detective, as part of the investigation in this case, did you and Detective Howard work to acquire video that was recorded by various people of the shootings?
Yes.
And do you recognize the video that's up on the screen?
It looks like one of those, yes.
Okay, and this is the recorded by someone called Ford Fisher, News to Share. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Could we begin playing this video? I'm going to have it stopped here in just a second, but let's go ahead.
Someone just got killed. Felt like a ricochet on the camera. Hey, you in the shadow!
Detective, does this video show the immediate aftermath of the defendant's killing of Joseph Rosenbaum?
It appears so, yes.
I'd move Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Is there objection? No. Received. May I see you turn for a second?
Okay, and then finally, Detective, can we please pull up, I think it's Exhibit 73. Is that the one I gave you? Before we begin that video, Detective, at some point in the investigation, did you become aware of the fact that there was drone video that someone had recorded? If you know.
Yeah, early on, I don't know the exact date, but early on we did see on a news segment, I believe it was a Fox News segment, that there was drone footage that we hadn't found at that point in time.
Do you have any idea what the source of that drone footage was?
I believe it was accredited to Urban Aired.
I have on the screen a video which has been marked as exhibit number 73. Is this that footage that you're referring to?
It appears so.
Okay. Can we please play that for the jury? Detective, just to help everybody understand, that was footage taken from a position south of the 63rd car source lot looking north into the lot. Would that be roughly accurate to say?
Yeah, it'd be right around that area, looking northbound.
And does that show the shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Okay. I would move Exhibit 73 into evidence.
Is there objection?
I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, Detective. Okay. Did you, I know that you've shown us the gun. Did you ever measure the barrel on that gun?
I never personally measured it. I believe on the E-trace form that I think Officer Van Week performed on, it would show that barrel length there. But I never personally did.
It's not a short, you don't believe it's a short barreled rifle, do you?
No, I do not.
Now, you were asked some questions initially by Mr. Binger about if anybody else was killed that evening. During those time of those riots, there were people that had been seriously injured, correct?
Yes.
Law enforcement officers had been seriously injured, is that right?
Correct.
One officer was struck in the face with a brick, is that right?
Yep.
And then a man who came out to help that officer, somebody had filled I think it was a bottle with cement and hit that person in the face, is that right? Breaking his jaw?
I don't have firsthand knowledge of that aspect, but the brick one I know for a fact.
In terms of, I'm going to ask you this question. One of the things in your role as a detective was you had gotten information regarding a specific group called Armed Citizens to Protect Our Lives and Property. Is that right?
Correct.
And that video or that Facebook post listed specifics, August 25th, 6 p.m., things like that, right?
It was like a Facebook group meeting.
Okay. Your report indicates there are no indications in the email that Kyle Rittenhouse liked or showed interest in the Facebook post or the group itself, correct?
Correct.
And you've been present for all the testimony, is that right?
I have.
And so you heard some of the questions regarding Detective Howard regarding kind of what your role as a detective is, right?
Yeah.
You don't work for Mr. Binger, do you?
No, I do not.
If I said that a detective is really kind of a truth seeker, you don't care which way the evidence goes, you just want to get it right. Would that be fair?
Yeah, throughout the investigation, we referred to ourselves as the fact finders.
So you're not supposed to, and I'm not saying you are, you're not supposed to take sides, correct? You're just supposed to, wherever the evidence leads you, you go.
Correct. We remain neutral.
So when you arrived, I know that you said you arrived at the Antioch Police Department. It was about what time, if you remember?
I honestly don't recall. It was a long night.
Early in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like 3 or 4 in the morning? Sound about right?
That would sound about right, yes.
And at that point, can you tell me what, if anything, you had reviewed in the way of evidence?
We had seen at that point, I believe, 2 videos that were circulating on social media that were pretty grainy, shared secondhand. We really didn't have the original source of it that showed, I believe, the first shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum, and then I want to say the next 2 as well in separate clips.
At that point, you didn't have any, because of the time, you didn't have any, no statements had been taken yet, as far as you knew, correct?
None that were relayed to me.
And obviously at that point, none of the forensic work or anything like that certainly was maybe being collected, but it wasn't completed.
Correct.
Okay. And this was even before Gage Grosskreuz's interview with police. True?
Yeah, because first shift conducted that, and that'd be sometime after 6 or 7 a.m. The interview with Mr. Grosskreutz occurred somewhere after 6 or 7 a.m. when day shift came on. So our interactions down in Antioch were closer to 3 or 4 a.m.
And you had, if I'm right, you had placed Mr. Rittenhouse under arrest for these offenses at about 6-ish in the morning?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And again, I'm not being critical. You had basically seen some grainy footage of the videos, and that's what you had at that point. Fair?
We had his admission that he had been involved in the shootings, and then, yeah, some video, absolutely.
And the next day, meaning the 27th, you are meeting with the DA's office to formalize charges against Mr. Rittenhouse, correct?
To draft a criminal complaint.
At that point, had you been made aware of or reviewed the statement by Richie McGinnis about what he had observed? Do you remember?
I don't recall if I saw that exact one yet. We really didn't sit down and read all the reports for at least a few days, given everything and how fluid the situation was.
Okay, so to be fair, he was charged prior to all of the information actually coming in, correct?
The criminal complaint was drafted prior to us concluding the investigation. I would agree with that.
And you and I might deal with warrants kind of on a regular basis. You ask for search warrants kind of in the regular course of your job, right?
Correct.
And so how it works is you write an application for a warrant, putting forth why you believe there's probable cause that the thing that you're looking to search will contain relevant information in your investigation, right?
Correct. Commonly referred to as an affidavit.
Okay. And you swear that affidavit out, right?
Correct.
And you present that to a judge, and the judge reviews that. If the judge reads it and says there's probable cause, then the judge will sign that warrant, and then you can execute it. Is that fair?
Correct.
Now, in this case, you drafted an affidavit to get the phone belonging to Gage Grosskreutz, right?
I don't know if it was me who drafted the affidavit or Detective Howard, but between the two of us, an affidavit was drafted, correct?
And that affidavit was presented to a Kenosha County judge
Correct.
who reviewed it and signed it. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes, sir.
So you had a valid, in your mind, certainly a valid search warrant, correct?
Correct.
I know there's been information or conversations about this Marcy's Law and things like that. You've been an officer for how long? 10 years?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had a search warrant signed by a judge that you did not execute?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had a search warrant that you did not execute in a homicide investigation?
I don't recall. It's possible. Sometimes you have warrants where you just maybe you realize you messed up an affidavit. There's been times I have not served an affidavit or a signed search warrant. I can't say with certainty whether or not it was on a homicide investigation, though.
If you don't execute it, is it most of the time because of what you just said, you believe there might be something faulty with the search warrant?
That's the common reason, but you can have times where new information comes forward and you determine you're not going to execute said search warrant.
Did new information come forward in this case as to why you would not execute a search warrant for Gage Grosskreitz's phone?
As was discussed previously, we were advised, given Marcy's Law, it would not be ideal to execute that search warrant.
Who advised you of that?
I believe it was a conversation with the attorneys. I don't know who brought it up initially, though.
So when you say the attorneys, Mr. Binger was one of the attorneys?
I believe so, yes.
So, tell me if I'm right, the prosecutors in this case advised you not to execute the search warrant for Gage Grosskreitz's phone?
That sounds correct.
Have you ever had a prosecutor say to you, "Detective, you have a valid search warrant. Don't execute it"?
Not that I can recall, no. Beyond the previous one we just discussed.
Fair. Have you, since Marcy's Law went into effect, and I want to say this improperly, have you ever relied on Marcy's Law not to execute a search warrant since it's gone into effect?
We've had conversations in the aftermath, but I don't recall not searching one solely on that basis.
So this is, if I'm fair, it is the only one that you recall using Marcy's Law as the basis for not doing it.
Correct.
And it's the only one that you recall ever getting a direction from a prosecutor handling the case not to do it.
Pursuant to Marcy's Law, yes.
Okay. Now, you, being the lead detective on the case, you also had an opportunity to try to interview Gage Grosskreutz about a month or so.
September 24th.
Okay. And certainly he's an important, in your mind at that point, he's an important piece in the case, right?
Correct.
And so you set up a time to get his statement. Fair?
I don't think I was one that set it up, but there was an agreed upon meeting time, correct?
Had you already reviewed, if you recall, his original statement to Officer Birch?
Yeah, I had.
And had you reviewed the video in the case as well, involving Mr. Grosskreutz?
Yeah.
So you knew that he had lied about dropping his gun, correct?
There was definitely a discrepancy between what the video showed us and what his original statement to Officer Birch showed.
And when you interview Mr. Grosskreutz in September, once you kind of get to the meat and potatoes about what had happened with him, he refused to answer your questions. Is that right?
He consulted with his attorney, and yeah, we did not get all of our questions answered.
Did you have an opportunity to confront him with the, as you describe them, inconsistencies or discrepancies with his original statement? Did you have an opportunity to kind of talk to him about those?
I attempted to, yeah.
Would he answer those questions?
No.
No?
No, he would not, sorry.
So is it fair that at that point the interview just kind of ended? He doesn't answer your questions. I'm assuming then at that point it's over?
For the most part, it sounds correct.
You asked for permission or consent to look through his phone. Is that right?
Correct.
And you did that for multiple people in this case. Did you not ask for permission?
Yes, we asked many people.
And there's actually a form that you use that they sign that grants you permission to do that, right?
Correct.
Okay. And in this particular case, did he ever give you permission to look through that phone?
No, he did not.
There was, and you've heard about this skateboard in this case, the skateboard belonging to Anthony Huber, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know a person, when I mean know, are you aware of a person named Hannah Giddings?
Yes, I am.
And that is was Mr. Huber's girlfriend?
Correct.
You were informed that Miss Giddings had that skateboard. Is that right?
I'm going to object calls for hearsay.
It sounds like hearsay.
I'll ask it to you this way then. Did you ever request a search warrant to get that skateboard?
No, we never had a solid idea as to where it was.
Did you ever ask any potential witness if he or she might have it?
We were in communication with Hannah Giddings to try and obtain that skateboard, yes.
And I don't want you to tell me what she said, but based on the information that you had, do you think that you had a basis to get a search warrant for it?
No, because one of the aspects of a search warrant is you have to define where you're going to search, and without a solid location that would determine that, I wouldn't have enough for a search warrant.
Did you ever ask her to just turn it over?
Yes, we did.
Do you have it?
It's not in our evidence, and I don't personally have it now.
I'm sorry, that's kind of what I meant. You were asked by Mr. Binger about if anybody asked you to do any other DNA testing on that gun, right?
Correct.
Now, he can make that request, right? Mr. Binger can say to you, Detective, I want you to do some follow-up.
Correct.
Okay. Did he ever do that?
No, he did not.
You were aware that Richie McGinnis had made statements about whether or not Joseph Rosenbaum ever grabbed or touched the barrel of that gun, right?
I believe based off his statement, he described it as him juking away from him, so there was no indication that there was contact.
So based on the fact that, well, I'll ask it to you this way. You didn't tell Officer Van Wee where to where to swab, right?
Correct, I did not.
And would there be any harm in swabbing the barrel of that gun looking for DNA?
When you say harm, the crime lab limits us to swab submissions on the front end. So traditionally, we have a standard operating procedure for firearms. So I don't feel comfortable saying harm. We have a standard procedure, and that's what we followed.
Okay. How about you wanted to look through Mr. Rittenhouse's phone, correct?
Correct.
And you got a search warrant to do that?
Either me or Detective Howard, yes.
All right. And I think the evidence or the testimony has been that the make or model of the phone that he had would have made that impossible at that point without him giving you the key or the code.
Yeah, the iOS, the software in the phone was beyond decryption.
And he voluntarily provided you information that unlocked a phone that you would otherwise not have had an opportunity to look at, right?
It came in through the attorneys, correct.
Okay. Now, you have described in your interviews with witnesses the night of the 24th and the night of the 25th as the most chaotic days of your professional life. Is that fair?
I'd include the 23rd, but 23rd and 24th.
So those days, 23rd, 24th, 25th, most chaotic days that you've had as a detective or a police officer even?
Correct.
Okay. So it's Exhibit 39. You've seen this picture? Yes, it's an evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. So that gentleman whose body's cut off, but with the camo pants on, that's Joseph Zeminski, right?
Joshua
Zeminski, right?
Yeah, on the left-hand side.
Right. And his wife is pointing at him. That's Kelly?
Kelly Zeminski, or Kelly Dunn.
Okay, fair enough. And he's, I don't know, you see that he's holding a pistol in his right hand?
Agreed.
Okay. Now, you see him, if you're comfortable saying this, you see him throughout the evening, throughout your investigation in various videos and things like that, correct?
Correct.
Did you conduct, or somebody in your department conduct an interview with Mr., I don't want you to tell me what he said. Did you conduct an interview with Mr. Zeminski?
Yeah, Detective Howard and I interviewed him.
Did you attempt to locate that pistol?
Yes.
Were you able to locate that pistol?
No. Did you hear me?
Yeah, you said that you were unable
We
to
were
locate
unable to locate that pistol, correct.
Why wasn't it?
He had reported it stolen prior to our interview with him,
So it was gone.
according to him.
Now, have you have, is it fair to say as the lead detective, or one of the lead detectives, I don't want to take anything away from Detective Howard, that you have reviewed all of the videos in this case?
I have not personally, no.
No?
No, between the two of us.
Split them up, kind of?
He did the bulk of the video investigation.
Okay. Have you seen the video with Joseph Rosenbaum screaming, "Shoot me," and then saying the N-word?
I have seen that video, yes.
Okay. Have you observed, in a minute, this is 74. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 74. Take a peek at that. Does that appear to be the backside of Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Bring it up. Okay. Well, it's coming then. And does it appear that Mr. Rosenbaum, it looks like he's moving, right? Like he's walking?
Yeah, I'd like to see it in motion to say it with certainty, but
Is that a video or a still? Okay. He's carrying in his, what would be there, his left hand, what looks like a chain. Is that right?
correct.
Based on the testimony that you've heard, he didn't have anything to lock up that evening, did he? As far as you know?
As far as I know, no.
Going to show you Exhibit 75. And Judge, I would move 74. I don't think I did. No. See? 75, is that a picture of Joseph Rosenbaum there in the middle?
It looks like it, but the lighting's really bad. It almost looks like he has a red sleeve on him. So I don't want to say with certainty.
So you're not certain that that person right there with with the mask over his face is Joseph Rosenbaum?
The mask is consistent with what I saw him wearing in the latter half of the night, but just based off the lighting there, I'm a little hesitant to say with 100% certainty.
Okay. Can you bring that back up for a second? Does it appear to be fair that he's holding a bag?
Appears so, yeah.
Okay, so, and we've heard a million times that Joseph Rosenbaum had a bag.
Correct.
Okay, so the bag fits and the mask fits Joseph Rosenbaum, right?
It does.
Okay. Are you aware that Mr. Rosenbaum was pushing lit dumpsters into the street? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's right. Tell me if you recognize or remember seeing.
Yep, he's on the right-hand side of the screen,
Okay.
T-shirt on.
Okay, and so you see him, you're aware that he's screaming racial epithets, you're aware that he's got the chain, he's pushing dumpsters. You also see that he tipped over a porta potty, right?
I don't remember ever seeing that personally, but that's been relayed to me, yes.
You,
That's been relayed to me. I don't remember seeing it personally, though.
you didn't see this in your investigation?
Downstairs.
So you saw him pushing over the porta potty. Would you agree that his behavior is that of somebody who is acting like a rioter?
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
It's just a characterization the jury can decide for themselves
Can you read it?
to the extent that they need to do so.
Sorry.
Repeat the question.
You don't have to answer the question.
Okay.
Do you sustain the objection, Judge?
I sustain the objection.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You also heard Carrie Ann Swart talk about him carrying an empty water bottle around with him, or multiple water bottles with him, right?
I remember hearing one. I don't remember hearing multiple.
Okay. And that you remember her telling us, meaning us in court, that she took it with him when he left, right?
He took it with him when he left.
Yep.
Yes.
And are you aware that there's been indications that homemade gas bombs were made from water bottles that evening.
I have heard that, correct.
Now, can you bring up the FBI video? So this is, what's the number on this?
Ours hasn't been marked.
It's the same one.
It's the same as presented in the video.
Do you have an objection if I just show this? So, and this is the FBI fixed wing video, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, go ahead.
It's up. It's up.
Okay, stop it. Now, we all, I think, have agreed, this blue circle is Joseph Rosenbaum, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, to be fair, there's been talk about whether or not Mr. Rittenhouse was chasing down Mr. Rosenbaum. What you see here is Mr. Rosenbaum, and I'm not saying that he actually physically ducks, but he ducks in between two vehicles to let Mr. Rittenhouse pass him. Is that right?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This calls for speculation, and I think the jury can watch the video and draw their own conclusions.
It really is speculative because you're asking the motive of the decedent as to why he took the path that he did, and you're asking the officer to comment on it.
Then I'll withdraw the question and rephrase it. Very good. You would agree that Mr. Rosenbaum steps out of the path that he had been traveling and in between two vehicles, right?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. Same objection.
No, overruled. I mean, it may be the same objection, but it's overruled.
So you see him step between the two vehicles, yes?
He is walking southbound, and then he ends up going
South-southwest, and ends up, I don't know if I'd say between the two cars based off what I'm seeing, but it's hard to tell with that blue circle, but he's definitely off the path he was currently traveling on.
Okay, and the other, play the video if you can. And when Mr. Rittenhouse passes him, he then comes out from the area by the two cars and is now back traveling this way, right?
Once the white dot is south of those cars, the blue dot appears to come north-northeast slightly, then continue southbound.
And Kelly Zeminski and her husband are right there, correct?
When you say right there, they're the green and pink dot, I would say.
Yeah, so they're right next to, or the two closest people to Mr. Rittenhouse and Mr. Rosenbaum, right?
At that time, it appears so, yes.
Okay. Did you hear, I don't know if it's been played yet, did you hear a portion of a tape? So we know Kyle Rittenhouse says, or you believe that you hear friendly, friendly, friendly. That's been discussed, right?
I haven't said that, but it's been said, yes.
What also was testified to by Detective Howard was gun, 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 you ain't gonna do shit, motherfucker, right?
You won't do, I think, is what is said, but something along those lines, yes.
And we know that's from Rosenbaum.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. There's no evidence on that.
He testified that it was what that he said.
That's different than we know. If he wants to ask this detective what this detective thinks, but ultimately it's a jury question.
You're saying that Detective Howard said that?
Yes.
That was his opinion as to who was the speaker.
Did you listen to that tape?
I hear those phrases. I don't know if I could confidently say who says what, though.
At this point, then, have you listened to the tape and have you heard the phrase, get him, get him, get him?
I have not heard that, no.
You haven't heard that?
No.
And that would be right before Joshua Zeminski shoots the firearm in the air.
Your Honor, he just answered he hasn't heard it, so how can he say when it happened?
The
detective just said he hasn't heard these words. The next question is, those words happen at a certain time. The detective's already said he hasn't heard it, so.
Start over.
So it's your testimony that you do not hear someone say, get him, get him, get him.
This question's been asked 3 times.
I want to make sure that is that true?
I have not heard that. Correct.
I want you to listen to the tape and tell me if you can hear that. I want you to listen to that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear that?
I hear something along those lines, but I couldn't confidently say that's get him. But it's definitely the same phrase repeated 3 times.
And do you see Mr. Rosenbaum then chase Mr. Rittenhouse through the parking lot, right? You don't dispute that?
No.
Okay. Do you hear, and have you heard the videos where the one gentleman says, cranium that boy?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay, what does that mean to you?
I would assume it's someone talking about hitting someone in the head is my best guess.
Okay. And you observe Mr. Rittenhouse speaking to Mr. Grosskreutz, right, after the shooting?
Correct.
Okay. Would you describe Mr. Grosskreutz based on your observations of him running after Mr. Rittenhouse?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is characterizing a video we've all seen. The jury can draw their own conclusions. Mr. Grosskreutz has already testified on this point.
Overruled.
Could you repeat what you asked, please?
Did you, based on your training and experience as a police officer, watching the videos, did it appear to you that Mr. Grosskreutz was chasing after the defendant? Chasing after Mr. Rittenhouse?
He was definitely running in the same direction.
Behind him?
Behind his path.
Okay.
No comment on the witness's answer, either orally or with facial reaction.
Very good. Thank you. What I want to ask you about, too, is there are multiple times, we've talked about the times that Mr. Rittenhouse has actually pulled the trigger, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You'd agree there are multiple times, based on the surrounding circumstances, that he doesn't pull the trigger, right?
I can think of one time for sure I've seen where, when you say he didn't pull the trigger, I don't. The gun may be pointed at someone.
You saw the video where the person, I showed it to Mr. Grosskreutz, the person runs up to Mr. Rittenhouse and then steps back, right?
Yes, I've seen
You saw
that. Correct.
And no shot fired.
Correct.
You saw other people that were kind of, it wasn't a 2 or 3 person chase. There were multiple people kind of around Mr. Rittenhouse, some of them brandishing weapons, correct?
There were people, and there were people that were armed, absolutely.
And those people who didn't attack him, he didn't fire at them, did he?
Correct.
The only people that he fired at were people that had either kicked him, hit him with something, or pulled a gun on him when he's running down Sheridan Road, right?
I would agree with that statement.
And after initially when he sees Gage Grosskreutz, you'd agree when Mr. Grosskreitz's hands are up, he doesn't fire.
Correct.
There's a person to Mr. Grosskreitz's, it would be his left, with a metal pipe. Do you remember that?
I know earlier we saw, you called it a wooden club. I don't know, I remember seeing a wooden, or fairly off the distance, there's a metal pipe, yes.
And so people who are armed, he doesn't fire at any of those people, does he?
Correct.
After the shooting, I counted, and I'm not asking you for the specific number, but there's multiple shots fired after Mr. Rittenhouse fires his last shot, right?
Correct.
I counted about 10, but there's multiple, right?
Agreed.
He never turns and fires in that direction, does he?
No.
So there, I think it was the video that Mr. Binger showed you, the drone footage. He showed you that on direct examination. Okay. Do you know where that came from? How you got it? Or whether you got it? Do you know where it came from?
Someone turned it over to us.
And do you know when that was?
I want to say Friday late morning.
If you know, Hannah Giddings, was she in court while this hearing's been going on, this trial?
I believe I saw her today, but beyond that, I can't say with certainty beyond that.
So you believe she was here today?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Was there, don't take it as a criticism, was there any effort to get the skateboard, talk to her about that today?
No.
Thank you for your time.
Redirect.
Detective, this drone footage that we just showed the jury, the version that we showed the jury, did you and Detective Howard have any versions of that prior to Friday?
Not independently. We had, it was something attached to a news segment, so the video existed, but it wasn't in its raw form.
That was a news segment on Tucker Carlson on Fox News, do you know?
That sounds correct.
And that aired a couple days after the shootings, right?
I believe so.
And so ever since then, you've been trying to get the highest definition version of that video, is that right?
Correct.
And now we have it?
It appears so.
And after we got it on Friday, did you take a look at it?
A little bit, yeah.
And did you get a chance to look at it at home?
A little bit.
Okay. Did you were you able to zoom in and look at details of the defendant's actions in that video?
Yes.
What did you see?
So it appears that when the defendant comes around what we've been referring to as the Duramax vehicle, he deliberately, when I say deliberately, with caution and intentionally, sets down the fire extinguisher and then appears to bring his rifle up and point it in the direction of the Zeminskis.
Then what happens?
It's hard to tell based off where it was and based off what I was viewing it on, which was my work phone, so it wasn't the highest def. But it looks like Joshua Zeminski takes a couple steps towards him, and then at that point, the defendant starts to run, and then Rosenbaum follows.
Does the video also show the shooting, the killing of Mr. Rosenbaum?
It does.
And When you look at that video, how close does Mr. Rosenbaum appear to be to the defendant?
This is just going off of me looking at it again on a phone, but not closer than a few feet.
Not close enough to touch the defendant.
It does not appear so, no.
Now, I want to go back to the beginning of your testimony. You were asked about the process by which a criminal complaint was drafted in this case, and I think you said that that was done before the investigation was complete. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Why would a criminal complaint be prepared before the investigation is complete?
It's not atypical for that to happen, especially in a major case, a homicide. There's a lot of legwork that has to be done, even when you know who did it. So in this case, we obviously knew who did it, but we have to get all the facts. So we'll typically, in this situation, because there was an extradition issue, the defendant was in Illinois and we needed him up here to be heard for court, we had to get a warrant entered in to have that done, which is why you typically would do an early probable cause statement versus waiting until the investigation completed.
Are there also time limits in terms of how long someone can be held in custody pending possible criminal charges?
Yeah, I believe it's 48 hours.
Is it fair to say that after the complaint was drafted and filed with the court that you continued to investigate the case?
Absolutely.
And Detective Howard did as well?
Correct.
Did any of the subsequent investigation you did, any of the new information you gathered, change your original referral to the district attorney's office for criminal charges against the defendant?
I haven't read the criminal complaint in a long time, so I can't say with certainty, but I don't recall any changing the grand scope.
You were asked questions about Gage Grosskreuz's phone. Without having possession of his phone, did you have access to his Facebook Live video?
We had a copy, but I don't believe it was the original copy.
Again, it was one of these things where it wasn't the highest possible resolution of it?
Yeah, I think someone used like a screen capture software program and saved a copy.
Based on what you saw in that Facebook Live video, do you feel like, without having his phone, you knew what Gage Grosskreutz had done that night before the defendant shot him?
In the immediate time beforehand, not the rest of the night, though.
You were asked some questions about Anthony Huber's skateboard. When you watch the videos of the defendant killing Anthony Huber, were you able to see that skateboard clearly?
Yeah.
Are you generally familiar with skateboards yourself?
No.
Have you ever ridden a skateboard?
No.
Do you know anyone who has?
It's actually irrelevant. He knows anybody that's ridden a skateboard.
What is the relevance?
Well, I think the point is we need this exact skateboard, and I'm exploring his familiarity with skateboards in general. Because once you've seen one, you've pretty much seen them all.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Fair enough. You also were asked about, and there's been references in the testimony to some video in which Joseph Rosenbaum says, "Shoot me," followed by the N-word, "shoot me," followed by the N-word. I don't know that we've actually played those videos, but do you have any idea what was leading up to that?
It appeared there was some back and forth in the parking or the service station at the southeast corner of 60th and Sheridan.
Was he upset because someone had shot a gun at him? Or, I mean, pointed a gun at him?
It appeared he alluded to that, yes.
Speculative. Disregard the answer, please.
You were asked questions about this empty plastic water bottle. That Mr. Rosenbaum had in his bag that night. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you have any indication that Mr. Rosenbaum ever created any sort of chemical bomb or ammonia and bleach bomb or anything like that night?
No.
Do you have any indication that at any point before he was killed by the defendant, there was anything in that bottle?
No.
When you see people carrying around empty plastic water bottles, does that suggest to you that they're about to commit a crime?
No.
You were asked some questions about the defendant's usage of his gun and the other people around after killing Joseph Rosenbaum, after killing Anthony Huber, after shooting Gage Grosskreutz. He gets up and he walks away from the scene, correct?
Correct.
You mentioned that there were some gunshots after that. What did the defendant do in response to those gunshots, if you know?
I don't recall.
Okay. I have nothing further.
You cross?
You turn around and look at that video for a second, if you would, Detective. I'm showing you 73. So this is the drone video that you say that you believe that you can see hold on a second. This video, you think, make sure I'm right, you can see Mr. Rittenhouse pointing his firearm. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see Mr. Rittenhouse at this point?
No.
Okay. Play it for a second. All right, stop. Do you see him yet? We're 1 second in.
So, just so you're aware, you can't do it with this program as far as I know, but like on my iPhone, my work iPhone, you can pinch to zoom.
So what the jury gets to see, we'll never see that, right?
If there's a way to zoom it in.
Okay, well, this is what we have. And you'd agree that from this video that we have, what you've testified to is unobservable. Agree?
Off this view, absolutely.
Okay. Did you send the video to be enhanced in any way to like the crime lab or anything like that?
I haven't personally, no.
Do you know if anybody has?
I believe the prosecution
Is doing that now?
I believe so.
Okay.
Not your head.
Sorry.
No, I'm talking to the district attorney.
Oh. So this is the video where no, hold on. That's Joseph Rosenbaum, right?
In the middle.
This gentleman right
Red
here.
shirt, black pocket.
Yep, this is him. Okay. Can you play the video, please?
Shoot me, nigga!
Behind him was who? It's not in the frame right now, but he was behind him a second ago.
Just can you go back just so I can confirm?
Sure.
I'm guessing it's Joshua Zeminski, but yeah, Joshua Zeminski.
Okay. Go ahead. Wait.
Everything you got, shoot me, nigga! Shoot me, nigga!
Now, do you know? You have no idea why he's saying that, correct?
I don't know why he's saying that.
But we've established he's saying it in the guise or in the surroundings of a Black Lives Matter protest. Yes?
Agreed.
You had said that on this video that we don't get to see, you're able to see things in terms of how far away you believe Joseph Rosenbaum is, right? From
You talking about the
Mr.
drone
Rittenhouse.
video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, in your training and experience as a detective, do you know what extreme stippling is?
I know stippling is related to when a gunshot occurs, but I couldn't say what extreme stippling is now.
What's stippling?
You're putting me on the spot here. It's I believe it's when gunpowder hits the skin, but
That you're close enough. So if somebody shoots, or if somebody is close enough to a gun when it's fired, the gases that come out of that gun burn the skin of that person, correct?
I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope of redirect, Your Honor.
Hold on.
I don't know enough about it to say that that's the textbook definition, but it's definitely indicative of proximity to a fired gun.
Based on your investigation in this case, Joseph Rosenbaum had stippling on his body, correct?
Correct.
Through your investigation, do you know if Mr. Rosenbaum had stippling on his hand?
I'd have to see the medical examiner's report to say yes or no.
You don't have a recollection of that?
I don't.
Do you have a recollection of where you observed it?
I remember seeing it in the preliminary autopsy results, but I don't remember exactly where, no.
It was a bad question. When I say where, I mean where on his body?
I don't remember, no.
I don't have anything else. Thank you, Detective.
Any redirect?
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Trying to locate the full video that was just shown to the jury there. Could I just have a minute to see,
Yep.
see if I can find that?
She says she's complaining about what she sees outside, and she says, I'm going to go home and put pajamas on right away. Hey, just think, it's only about 45 days, and the days will start getting longer. As I indicated, the building is almost 100 years old, and last year they undertook a project to see how much of the damage could be reversed and what the cost would be. I was amazed.
Go ahead. No, we're getting set
No,
up. So.
I could go on for hours, as anyone who works here knows. But we'll.
I'm getting the rest of that video.
Okay.
There was an excerpt just played for the under the rule of completeness. I'd like to have the whole thing played, so I'm getting that ready to go.
Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Yep, it should be in a couple seconds.
In a couple seconds, well then I'm unaccustomed. I'll be quiet.
Okay, this is the Twitter Julio Rosas, the Fight at Ultimate Gas Part 1. Can we play that, please?
Hear someone say, "Don't point your gun at me"? Let's back up about 20 seconds, please. Play from there, please. Someone just now say, "Don't point your motherfucking gun at me"?
I honestly did, no.
Okay, let's play that back again, please. 10 more seconds, please. Go ahead. Did you hear it there?
I heard part of it, but
Okay, let's play this to the end, and then we'll play the next clip, which just to give the whole sequence.
You got shoot me, nigga. Shoot me, nigga. Bust on me, nigga, for real.
Now we're going to play part 2 of this. It's okay. And this should be part 2 of that. Those are going to be marked as exhibits 78 and 79. I'd move those into evidence.
Objection?
No.
Proceed.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Recross?
I don't.
You may step down. What about it, folks? Time to go out into the dark of night. Please don't talk about the case overnight. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. Mrs. Antaramian, is she here? I'll turn you over to her, and you might as well go up to the jury room and enjoy the evening.